Welcome to Mushroom Hour. Today on Mushroom Hour, we are interviewing Mr. Neil Thenier of Wild Kingdom Extracts. Neil is a lifelong forager, a musician, and an IIN, and that's Institute for Integrative Nutrition, health coach. With an extensive understanding of nutrition and a respect for ecological balance, Neil's team at Wild Kingdom creates amazing medicinal mushroom extracts that are optimized to supercharge your body and are sourced using methods that may even restore their natural environment and propagate more fungal abundance. Their herbal extracts are made from wild harvested herbs and mushrooms, and a portion of every sale is donated to forest restoration worldwide. Neil emanates a passion for mushrooms, a reverence for the natural world, and is indeed on a mission to harness the power of nature to make you feel better. Neil, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I was really excited when you reached out to me because there are a lot of different medicinal mushroom companies out there. And I definitely, after reviewing your pages, reading more about you, I think there's a lot that makes Wild Kingdom really unique. So I definitely was excited to get you on and talk about that, everything from sourcing to processing to what your products do. And obviously someone with your background has a lot to bring to the party when it comes to making medicinals and making supplements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a lifelong journey of, self-education, formal education, curiosity, and it's kind of just led me to this place where I have something that I'm really excited to share with the world.
Where I want to start off then is a little bit about that background. We talked in my little intro, I talk about a little formal education in nutrition, but why don't we talk more about that, kind of what your educational background was, and then how you found yourself in the world of mushrooms?
Yeah, sure. So growing up in a city like New York, I just kind of grew up a sedentary, junk fooditarian kind of kid. And the older I got, the more problematic my health became. So around age like 15, 16, I really just kind of realized I had to start taking care of myself. I had to understand what it meant to be healthy. I remember eating dinner with my family and we're eating like chicken and rice. And I'm like, Mom, is chicken healthy? And she's just kind of like, oh, maybe, I guess so. So like no one really knew. So
Right.
That was kind of step one. I started educating myself through different nutrition books, things like eating alkaline. I became a vegetarian, started exercising, and just kind of built this foundation that I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to feel great. And in that journey, definitely I came across mushrooms, and that really sparked my curiosity. And I went down that rabbit hole kind of full-heartedly, being surrounded by other people that were involved in health and wellness. I heard about IIN, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and really felt like I just wanted something kind of behind, my expertise that says like I actually did a course. I actually had some formal training. And I'm so glad I did that because it was a life-changing experience, not only to learn about health and nutrition, but really about community and about, things you can put in your body that aren't food that make you healthy. Things like sharing stories and friends and family and quality time. So, that was about a decade ago, and that's kind of where I'm now.
Nutrition from things that aren't food. That's a really cool concept. I mean, you dropped some great ones in there. Junk fooditarian. I may try that diet. No, there's a lot in there. Especially, I think it's interesting how your own journey for wellness. I mean, it was all kind of inborn. You thought like, am I being healthy? How do I become healthier? And that kind of set you on this voyage to really exploring the world of nutrition. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about, how mushrooms are nutritional superstars. Like, what is it in mushrooms, both edible and medicinal, but even just like edible mushrooms, what makes them so good for us? So can you talk a little bit about that? Just because I've heard some names of compounds, but I'm not an expert, and I've had people on who don't want to get too much into it. So what are some of the main things about mushrooms? And maybe we can start with just gourmet edible mushrooms that everyone has access to. What are some of the things that make them great as a nutrition source?
Yeah. With all mushrooms, there's all these different macro and micronutrients. And I mean, if we listed all of them, it'd be in the thousands.
Right.
Each of these micronutrients kind of fits into two buckets, either polysaccharides or terpenes. So your polysaccharides include beta glucans, and these are things that modulate your immune system. So what that means, if people don't know what that term means, is that if you're going about your normal day and you're healthy, you're at this like nice baseline of health right in the center. When you get sick, you fall below it. So what it means to modulate, it's kind of like tuning a radio. The polysaccharides modulate you up back to that baseline. But if you're someone who's autoimmune and your immune system's working overtime, it's attacking your body, it'll modulate you down to the baseline.
Wow.
Yeah, so mushrooms are something you could take for your health no matter where you are. If you're sick or autoimmune, it'll always bring you back to the center. And these are compounds that your digestive system can break down pretty easily. So if you're into culinary mushrooms like oysters, chanterelles, porcini, what have you, all those polysaccharides are in those mushrooms. And then on the other side, you have the terpenes, and they help manage things like inflammation, things like increasing the oxygen in your blood. Those things your body is not as good as digesting and breaking down. So that's why, I'm into making mushroom extracts, because using alcohol to extract those terpenes, those are things that are pre-digested now and can enter your bloodstream through your saliva glands or through your small intestines in your digestive system.
That's interesting, because you hear about different vehicles to deliver, especially medicinal mushrooms. So it's interesting to hear the science behind it, that, an alcohol extraction is actually taking those terpenes, which aren't polysaccharides, I guess, are just sugars, kind of chains of sugar. So your body doesn't know how to break down these terpenes that aren't just chains of sugar. So putting them in alcohol kind of pre-processes them so they're easier to absorb, kind of more bioavailable.
Yeah. Another fun fact is these polysaccharides, where they come from is actually tree bark or wood. So like wood, like the bark of a tree is essentially all these sugars that are like crusted and make the bark. But if you were to go eat the bark, your body wouldn't be able to digest it. So the mushrooms digest the tree bark and rearrange the molecules into a polysaccharide that we can digest. So, this kind of exemplifies the wisdom of nature.
Yeah. Well, and just that process of distillation, taking these compounds that are ubiquitous, or these molecules that are ubiquitous, but the key is making them into a bioavailable format, which the mushroom seems to be like this great translator of all these amazing molecules into things that humans can then digest and work with. So even just that is mind-blowing, understanding some of that science behind how mushrooms are working, how they're delivering nutrition to us. And, I guess one of my questions that just popped into my head, are the mushrooms, depending on what trees they're growing on, getting different nutrition or different bioavailable nutrients inside them? Is it like dependent on that food source?
Yeah. So first of all, each mushroom kind of has a special relationship to a tree. For example, chaga grows primarily on birch trees. You find chanterelles with oak or pine trees. And kind of what's going on is they're constantly exchanging nutrients. So mushrooms, what we know as mushrooms are kind of like the fruiting body of a greater microorganism called mycelium. So mushroom is kind of like the apple that carries the seeds and reproduces. Right. And the roots of the tree are known as the mycelium. So they're the roots of the mushroom. So they create these networks within the forest floors, and they are exchanging things like different foods like sugars and water. So this is like a big rabbit hole to go down, but if you look at the ecosystem, everything's growing in cooperation. Right. A tree all the way over here to the left that doesn't have water, a tree all the way here on the right can bring water to that tree via the mycelial networks. In exchange for water, trees give the mushrooms carbon or nitrogen. Everything's kind of getting traded off, so the ecosystem as a whole can grow and prosper.
So this whole ecosystem cycle is exchanging nutrients under the ground between, trees. Mushrooms are connecting, bringing the nutrition between these organisms. That is something that I tell people to kind of blow their minds, is that there is a neural network under the forest that's exchanging resources. These mycelium mats are really kind of the internet of the forest. And I think you just verbalize that in a really powerful way. So I do want to talk about then. I don't want to get too lost, like you said, in that rabbit hole, because we could have a long podcast talking about the life cycle of mushrooms, how they interrelate with trees and everything else. But I guess for you, I know that there's a deep relationship with foraging. I guess what's been your relationship with foraging? And then we can circle back to some of these mushrooms and then circle into Wild Kingdom. But what's been your relationship to foraging? When did you first get out into the woods and become part of this great circle of life we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So kind of my introduction to mushrooms started when I was a raw vegan and I was really obsessed with making smoothies. And I was
Okay.
like a religious follower of like the David Wolf culture.
Yeah,
And
sure. David
you
Avocado
know,
Wolf.
yeah, yeah. So I religiously shopped on his website, and I came across chocolate powder, reishi powder, and I was like, wait, what? This is mushrooms? This is powder? Like I could put this in my smoothie. And I started kind of learning about health benefits, and I was just like couldn't get over this fact that I was eating mushrooms. And I think I started listening to different podcasts, and I came across the work of Paul Stamets, who, by the way, I always reference as like the Jimi Hendrix of mushrooms. And I started reading his book Mycelium Running, and kind of what we just touched upon was like my first experience of learning all these things about the networks of the mushrooms. And this whole just curiosity and passion started just kind of growing inside me. And a friend of mine was looking to go to school in Seattle, and was looking to take a trip out there. And I was like, sure, I'll go with you. And we had plans to go hike Olympia National Forest. And we got there in like mid-September, and it was the height of the fall mushroom season. Oh my God, I was like, for the first time, like everything I was learning was like right in front of my face. Saw reishi mushrooms, turkey tail mushrooms, lion's mane, you name it. Whatever was what was there, I took pictures of it. And I have like a photo book of like 50 different mushrooms. And through all that, I was so excited, but I like didn't just go start picking stuff.
Right.
At this time too, I was really getting into rewilding aspects of health and nutrition. So I started kind of knowing that, okay, the Native Americans that were here before us, they did it in such a way that benefited the ecosystem, and everything was interconnected. So I didn't want to just go and start wreaking havoc on the ecosystem. But after that trip, I started hiking through the woods of Pennsylvania where I grew up, and having the same experience, finding these mushrooms, and was just so excited. And just really what I did was I realized the more I could learn about the ecology of the mushroom, the more I knew how to navigate my experiences with it.
Sure.
So just kind of using a quick example with turkey tail, that was really the first mushroom I started foraging. It's really abundant in the area of Pennsylvania where I'm from. And I noticed that during different parts of its life cycle, there'd be all this white powder kind of brushed up against it, kind of in the areas in the wood. And I realized through what I was learning that these were the spores of the mushroom, and the spores are the reproductive seeds. So when the spores spread, it grows more mycelium, and then the mycelium grow the mushrooms, and the life cycle kind of continues.
Right.
So I started to realize that if we start to forage the turkey tail mushrooms before the sporulation takes place, we're hurting the mushroom. We're interfering with its life cycle, with its mission, and that kind of can start to lead to some devastation. It's kind of like taking too many blueberries from a bush. There's too much stress on the plant or the mushroom, and it can't survive. But if we start to allow it to sporulate, and in this fine window of like 1 to 2 weeks after it's sporulated, before bugs and bacteria start to eat it,
Right.
we can go pick it. We can get the spores on our hands and our feet, like you said, using a perforated bag that we store the mushrooms in. As we start to walk through the forest, we're spreading the spores everywhere, and that's helping them proliferate. So that's kind of that positive interaction. It's that the more you learn about the ecology of, say, a mushroom or a tree, the more you're able to actually interact with it in a positive way. And this is something I'm really passionate about in life, because we kind of live in this don't interact with the ecosystem society, like leave it alone, let it be. but really it's our biological norm and hundreds of thousands of years of interacting with the ecosystem that has made it what it is today.
Absolutely. I think that's such a key thing. And I even said on a podcast I was interviewed on, just said that I firmly believe I'm part of nature. And they kind of laughed, like, of course you are. And I was like, well, I think that's a fundamental, a fundamental difference sometimes in how we view ourselves and our relationship with nature is, yeah, do we leave it as like a pristine, like we're at a museum or something, like don't touch the nature, don't touch the ecology, or do we understand that we're part of it and our interactions with it are integral to how it developed, how we've developed, and we don't want to stop interacting with it or shut it off from ourselves, but learn how to interact with it in a positive way. And I think that story, talking about the turkey tail sporulating, illustrates a number of different things. One being that relationship and how we can positively interact to sporulate the turkey tail mushroom. That's why they drop spores. So, mammals, different creatures come pick up the spores in their body. There are some mushrooms that don't shoot their spores very far and rely on creatures to come pick them up and spread them if they're going to propagate. So I think that story highlights that perfectly. And it's also just really interesting to hear about that mindfulness when you're out in the forest, because it's a big issue that gets brought up, when you pick some mushrooms or, you make an Instagram post where you pick a lot of mushrooms. People are like, oh, how are you making sure you're doing this responsibly? Aren't you destroying the mushrooms in that area? And I always tell people, yes, if you have that aerated bag and you're carrying around the mushrooms, the spores are dropping. But I think you just kind of explicated the next step, which is to actually see, has the mushroom sporulated yet? Has that fruiting body popped up and done its job? And then, you can take it in that prime window before the bugs get to it. But after it sporulates, and I think that's a level of stewardship that's really smart to enter into the conversation. And I think it's a more useful conversation than saying, don't pick the mushrooms, or, kind of having that hands off, we can't touch the nature attitude. I think really interacting with it, understanding it, helps us interact more responsibly. And that's something that, kind of flows into Wild Kingdom, because I saw you guys in your posts talking about the areas where you harvest from actually seeing an increase in the number of mushroom fruit bodies present, which is something that I think will blow most people's minds.
Yeah. So I've been living here in Los Angeles for about 2.5 years now, and it was right when I first got here 2 years ago. I found this really nice kind of hidden gem of LA, this forested area in Santa Anita Canyon. And it's this beautiful deciduous forest with all these rivers running through it. And I started realizing that there was some turkey tail there. So the first year, I just kind of found a couple of patches and picked from them in this way that we talked about, in a sustainable way. And then was really excited about that. And then the park was closed for quite a bit of time due to some like mudslides that were taking place. So I didn't get back to the spot for a year. And then when I came back to it the next year, all of these spots that I foraged like came back twice as populated as before. And plus there was all these other areas that had dead wood, but no turkey tails growing on them. And just kind of everywhere I went, I started seeing this, and I kept foraging the woods in this way. And now it's just like a hotspot for these turkey tails. And that was kind of, like I don't know if it's like a rites of passage or like a milestone kind of reached, but it just kind of made me feel like, at least I have a novice understanding of how to interact with the ecosystem.
That's a pivotal moment. I mean, you were out there like Johnny Mushroom Spore, like, oh, I can spread the mushrooms actually with my interaction, my responsible interaction with these. I can actually spread them. And it's actually something I've always wondered about, is how effectively can we, consciously cultivate or propagate wild mushrooms. Turkey tail, I know you can grow those commercially, but there are a number of different mushrooms like chanterelle, like porcini that you were talking about, that I've always had this idea, like, can we find some way where we can intentionally inoculate some of these mycorrhizal mushrooms that have the interactions with trees? Can we inoculate some of these purposely on certain trees or in certain forests that are loaded with the right kind of tree? And I think it's a little more complex than that. I think they're still learning why mushrooms associate with certain, not just the tree that's the proper species, but why that tree in particular. Is it age? Is it something about the structure of it, the surrounding landscape? So it might be a little more complicated, but what you're talking about, that's kind of the dawning of that moment, like, oh, it is possible. I can intentionally cultivate mushrooms out in the wild. And I think that's really cool. And for me, just us talking about that, I'm going to try to integrate that into my foraging, because that's the thing that I'm big on is foraging. That's kind of how I got my relationship with mushrooms. So I'm going to start being more conscious about, has this fruiting body actually spored yet? And like you're saying, you can usually tell, right? I mean, you usually see kind of that white dust around a fruiting body that says, hey, the spores have dropped.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like a lot of times I'll go on foraging trips. What I do first is go on scouting trips. If
Sure.
it's a new area, I'll go for like a week so I can see what's going on in the ecosystem. And with the example of turkey tails, there's so many indicators. I mean, you could tell when when they're just starting to grow, if the margin, the edge of the mushroom feels like buttery or like waxy. That's like, okay, they haven't reached maturity yet. And when that margin starts to thin out and become velvety, that's when they'll start to sporulate. And then when they sporulate, you could see the white spores on the wood, on other mushrooms. It's pretty obvious. And then also too, you'll see two different flushes on the same piece of wood. Maybe the flush on the left sporulated, but the flush on the right is growing. And once you kind of learn about this and get an eye for it, it becomes like second nature. It's like, oh, I could do this pretty quickly.
Well, it's one of those things, foraging, some of these pieces of knowledge, people are like, oh, that sounds complicated. But once you do it and you actually see it, you feel, oh, that's the buttery edge. Oh, that's the velvety edge. It gets in there on a cellular level. Like when you forage, I am always convinced that you have those experiences, and the things you learn, you remember so much better than if you read them in a book, or because you're actually physically touching it and creating that memory. And I think a lot of people start learning about the surrounding ecology and how mushrooms grow to really get a sense of habitat. Like what trees. Yeah, I know some people that can see the crowns of trees in different forests at certain times of the year to know, is that a good forest to go into or not? So I think it's great to marry that with the further ecological understanding of how the mushroom then develops during its life cycle and how to make sure it can keep coming back. Not just how to find it, but how to make sure you can take it at the right time to where it is coming back. And it's really interesting you started with turkey tail, because that one is so, abundant for a lot of people in North America. I mean, they can find turkey tail. That's everywhere.
Yeah. It was. I always say it's like the perfect beginner mushroom because of how widespread it is. I think it grows on every continent. So yeah, that was the first one for me. That's what I kind of like built my foraging relationship on, and that's what the logo of my company Wild Kingdom is. It's some blue turkey tails because in Pennsylvania we have all these beautiful like blue and gray and green turkey tails. So
oh my gosh, turkey tails can be some of the most beautiful mushrooms with the striations and the different color effects that you get. Yeah, turkey tails are absolutely gorgeous, and they're extremely potent medicinals.
Yeah.
Not only are they abundant, but they're one of the medicinals that I think, has a lot of beneficial compounds, and really has become known for its anti-tumoral properties as well. Like I always tell people, I give turkey tails to my dog. Because it is effective. She has a little tumor on her tail. We give her turkey tail. It is incredibly effective. Now, when you're talking about scouting, I think that's a really important thing to bring up too. So the first couple times when you go forage a given area, you're not necessarily trying to see what you can pick. You're trying to get a feel for the area and kind of what's going on.
Yeah. I feel like it'd be most effective with my time with the scouting. I was hearing this permaculturist talk last night. He was talking about making permaculture farms in Africa for people that were going through famine and different adversities. And he was saying when you arrived to the tribe's land, you couldn't just walk in. If you walked in, no one would see you. You'd be ghost-like. So you have to wait there, and then they have to sing you into the tribe. They sing the song, invite you in, and then you can be seen by everybody. And when I heard that story, I just thought that was the greatest analogy to what I've experienced in the forest. You can't just show up to some place and expect to take everything from it. That's kind of the colonial style thinking we're born into. So I like to go scouting. I like to see what's going on. I like to see how I can get involved. How can I be a positive impact on the ecosystem? And sometimes on these scouting trips, I'll just be there at the right place at the right time and find turkey tails or chaga or reishi or whatever that's ready to harvest. And I'm just so grateful for that. So,
But you're not going in with the rapacious capitalist mindset of I'm here to mine the mushrooms out of this part of forest. You're more like, hey, I want to get to know this forest and let it sing me into the depths, and then I can really start to explore. And I think on a practical level, that's something that really helps any forager when you come to a new place. It's my number one recommendation for people. If you come to a new place and there's trails, walk the trails without any intention to hunt it first. Because, I mean, just from kind of a practical foraging standpoint, if you go down every little rabbit trail off the main trail the first time you go thinking, oh, I'm going to find something, you kind of miss like, well, a mile down the trail, there's actually a way more accessible spot. So I think scouting has just so many benefits to like giving a trial run through that trail, through that area, and you get a much better sense of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just really fulfilling to be a part of something rather than just take from it. And, what one can experience in the forest with that, you can also bring into your daily life or your modern life. So it kind of goes both ways. It's really nice.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you've put that mindset and integrated it into your business. So we can talk about Wild Kingdom. And that was something that blew me away, was learning how you guys source your mushrooms, and kind of the ethos that you're describing is really built into every part of Wild Kingdom extracts.
Yeah. So just to give a bit of background, within the last 8 years, I've worked in supply chain for different health and wellness companies. So I've always been the guy that has to do the sourcing, has to build the teams, has to build the production to make sure that we can scale it up and grow really fast. So,
right.
I worked for companies where we made 14,000 bottles of raw vegan cold pressed juice and smoothies in one day, and doing smoothie delivery kits and gourmet meals for people's homes and things like that. So I just come from this background of grow really fast, high volume,
right?
Sleep. And this was in New York City where I'm from, so everything is like time is money. And just,
do you feel like that compromises the integrity of those raw vegan kits, is trying to like take so many at once? Does that make it really challenging as a sourcing expert?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just not to give too much information, but like there was periods of time where we were growing too fast, where we couldn't source. We used all organic ingredients, but we couldn't source enough to maintain the volume. So we had to start using conventional and make all these compromises.
Right.
And after experiencing that, after living through that, after kind of being miserable going through it, I didn't want that in my life, or I didn't want to build a company on that same ethos. So with Wild Kingdom, it's always quality over quantity. I'm just excited about growing. I think of my business as like a seed I planted, and I'm just trying to water it and create the right conditions for its life so that it can grow into the form and shape that, it was willed to by me or a greater power. I don't know.
Right.
But I'm really just trying to like take the time to put my best intentions and kind of just let it grow slowly, or let it mature, let it ripen. And I think with foraging, I've always been so amazed on how abundant the forest can be. There's times where I go in expecting little and I come out with a lot. Definitely goes the other way sometimes, but I've always managed to have exactly what I need to conduct my business and to help, share the products with people.
Well, that's really indicative of, someone who has a very conscientious mindset. And in speaking with you, before the podcast and now, I can tell you've got, I don't want to say necessarily spiritual, but you've got kind of a higher perspective on what you're doing and what you're building as a company, and hearing how you forage, how you're kind of cultivating and acting as a steward. It sounds like you've brought that into your business. And I think it's an important distinction. And I think it's an important thing for people to hear, because not every business has to be this thing that balloons up, a lot of times unsustainably overnight, to still be satisfying and successful and still give back to people. I think we are seeing a rise, especially in the medicinal mushroom market, but I think in medicinals, organic foods in general, of small scale producers that produce a really good product and don't compromise on the sourcing or the cultivation by rushing things. and it leads to a better product. Obviously they still have a devoted fan base, but they just get to a point where like we're making enough for our needs. And yeah, there might be a limited amount. It might be that we can't get 14,000 bottles in one day, but we're still making great medicine that's going to help people more than some diluted bottles, down the road. I remember talking to someone who is looking at getting into medicinal mushroom extracts. And he said, he was just looking at research people are doing now on some of the extracts on the market, and there's like little to no active compounds. Sometimes I guess there's not even mushroom in them or something. Like it's just kind of a wild west in a way. So I think having your mindset of like not trying to blow up too quickly, trying to source and feel really good about the products we make is definitely more and more the way to go. And I think it benefits the consumer and also benefits you and your team, because you're not pulling your hair out, you're not making compromises, you're feeling just really good about what you're making. And so I guess do a quick hit on like what are the products that you guys make at Wild Kingdom. Is obviously I'm guessing turkey tail, but what are some of the other extracts you guys make?
Yeah, so we do 4 extracts: turkey tail, chaga, reishi, and lion's mane. And yeah, kind of, in talking about foraging, kind of giving insight into what I do, I kind of feel like I'm a steward of the forest, of these mushrooms that come from the forest, and I feel really connected to what I'm doing. So my intention is always to positively interact. As someone who, before I started foraging and doing my own extracts, someone who's taken other companies' extracts, kind of what I found was that it was hard to get something that was quality, also at an affordable price, and something that was homegrown in the US. A lot of the mushrooms, no matter what brand you're taking, 90% chance they come from China.
Sure.
And China doesn't always have the best growing practices. So when I started kind of learning about that, I wanted to focus on quality, and kind of what I came up with was these 4 mushrooms. And I just had this mission of using the best quality ingredients. Like I know, especially here living in a metropolitan city like LA, you kind of live surrounded by so many people who have all these different food allergies and have to stay away from certain things. So the alcohol that I chose for doing the alcohol portion of the extract was organic grape alcohol. It's just the highest quality you can get, allergen-free, adds a great flavor to the extracts. So I was really excited to just use something that someone can just say, okay, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about grain alcohol or cane sugar or what have you.
I've never even heard of grape alcohol. I read that on your site. I was like, that's so cool. Grape alcohol? I want that. Yeah. I don't know what about it. It just sounds awesome. So does it have a flavor, kind of a grape flavor to it?
Yeah, if has notes of just kind of like fruitiness.
Grape alcohol, isn't that wine?
Yeah, it's actually ethanol. So it's the alcohol I use is 95% alcohol. So that pulls all those terpenes and acids just right out of the mushroom. So it's a great solvent for extracting. And then also too, the water that I use to do the water extraction of the mushrooms is wild forage spring water. We have this amazing spring in the Ojai Mountains in Southern California. That's just so pure. We purify it in our kitchen, and then also boil the mushrooms in that water to get the water soluble nutrients. So it's kind of like you have wild mushrooms, you have wild water, and it's just high quality organic grape alcohol that all come together and just deliver these amazing medicinal compounds of the mushroom. And what these extracts are, they're dual extracts. So you have the alcohol and you have the water. So in the alcohol you have all the terpenes, all the acids that will handle inflammation, and then you have the water portion that's all the polysaccharides and beta glucan that's going to modulate the immune system. So bringing those together in one bottle gives you everything that's available to the mushroom. If you just made a mushroom tea, you're missing out on the terpenes. If you just do an alcohol tincture, you're missing out on the polysaccharides and the beta glucan. So this kind of is starting to become like the standard in the industry, which I'm really happy about, because before that everybody was either just not even using mushrooms, just mycelium, and just doing a water extract. I mean, I still see tons of product that just do water extract, but you always want to find something that's dual extract.
Yeah, so you were able to go out and create the product that you really wanted, that had that highest level of integrity. I mean, yeah, that's kind of next level using the fresh mountain spring water, but it's really cool to create a product like that is of the highest integrity. And for you, you're down there in LA. I'm sure being able to use as much local ingredients, like there's some power in that I think does translate to the final product. The intention put into it, the care in selecting the ingredients, where it's coming from, that all has a massive effect on the final product. Now, I don't know if it makes the beta glucans more powerful in that water, but I think it does have, a huge effect. Now, as someone as the business owner, are you finding that, I want to use the right words here, are you finding that sticking to this level of integrity has really any downside? Do you ever think, I should just, lower the integrity a little bit, get it out there? I mean, is that trade-off ever play out in your head, or is that kind of a false dichotomy? Like, can you still grow and have a great business by even adhering to the highest quality standards?
Yeah, I'm totally confident that this is the way to go and this is what needs to happen. And I think there's been milestones all along the journey that just kind of reinforce this. And, kind of what the challenge with this is it has nothing to do with the production or nothing to do about creating this product, but it's actually telling the story. And I'm just kind of like really excited that I, could be here on the Mushroom Hour podcast talking about this with you, because I'm constantly trying to figure out, how do I tell this story? Like how do I tell people we're not just like a mushroom extract, but we're a positive force in the ecosystem, and there's all this passion and good intentions behind what we're doing, and we're really focusing on the quality and making sure that the human is taken care of and the ecosystem is taken care of, and kind of bridging that gap and bringing them both together.
I mean, it's a great story, and I think that is tough to tell in just, the wrapping of a little tincture bottle. It's hard to kind of relay the amount of effort that's gone into it, the amount of consideration, and just circle back. So all the mushrooms that you guys use in your products are wild foraged.
Yeah, that's right.
So no mass cultivated. These are all things pulled out of the forest. Now, you may not know this. I wonder, is there any difference in the nutritional content from those that are grown in the wild versus those grown commercially? Intuitively, I think there would be. Like, I think there's nutrition in some of these, old trees, this old growth forest. I think there are compounds that must be present in the forest that get translated to the mushroom that aren't present commercially. Or has that not been found not to be the case? Or maybe you don't know. But
yeah, that's absolutely the case.
Okay.
I think the best example on this is chaga, right?
Yeah.
So chaga, a wild mushroom that grows on birch trees, and their job is to kind of birch trees that aren't serving the ecosystem anymore, or that are unhealthy, or that the forest can't support. Chaga comes in and takes those birch trees, kills them, so that they can be converted back into soil. It's kind of like a cleansing agent in the ecosystem.
Yeah. Wow.
As it's killing off this birch tree, essentially, it's siphoning all these different nutrients from the bark, from the wood of the tree. And one special nutrient is called betulinic acid. And the reason why it's called betulinic acid is because the Latin name for the birch tree is Betulina canadensis. So that's where the name comes from. And when you do an alcohol extraction of that wild chaga, you're able to get that betulinic acid. And what it does for your body is it handles inflammation. So it's great for like leaky gut, or things like arthritis, and it's packed full of antioxidants. So it's really helping with everything pertaining to inflammation. So also too, I think about like 25 to 30 species of mushrooms are only mycologists have only been able to cultivate and grow about 25 to 30 different species, and there's about 2 million out there in the wild.
Yeah.
So chaga isn't one of them that they can grow yet. What they do is they take the spores from chaga and they inoculate them into different substrates like grains, brown rice, and they grow the mycelium, those roots that we talked about earlier.
Right.
And they do extracts from there because they can't grow it in a lab or a grow house. So in that extract, there is no betulinic acid because.
Where's my betulinic acid?
Right. So yeah, I always ask that question every time I take a chaga product.
That's huge. I mean, that's huge. So there is a distinct difference. I mean, I've had this conversation, and I think it's a talking point for a lot of medicinals. Mycelium on grain, like you're talking about, versus actual fruit body. And then I think the next, which intuitively to me, fruit body's always going to have more nutrition. I think there are studies starting to come out showing just that, which, would make the most sense to me. But I think then there's that next level of not only fruit body, but, for mushrooms cultivated in the forest versus those that can be commercially cultivated, like reishi, for example. I'm curious as to if reishi grown on logs in a commercial farm versus reishi found in the wild has any nutritional difference. I mean, it might not. I don't know if the spirits of the forest can imbue any nutritional benefit to the mushroom. But I just wonder, like, that examination of wild forage versus commercially grown to the same mushroom, is there any nutritional difference?
Yeah. So yes, using reishi as an example, kind of universally between cultivated and wild mushrooms are their vitamin D2 content.
Okay.
So mushrooms that grow out in the wild are exposed to actual sun,
Right.
and 10 times out of 10, their vitamin D content is going to be higher than something that's cultivated. And actually, something I learned recently that kind of fascinated me is every time I buy like cultivated oyster mushrooms as opposed to wild foraging oyster mushrooms, the stems on the cultivated are super long.
Right.
I always wondered that because the ones in the wild have like literally no stem. And what I learned was that in grow houses, mushrooms seek carbon to grow.
Right.
So the carbon collects at the top of the grow houses. So that's why they grow these long stems, because they're trying to get to the carbon floor. And then in the wild, the carbon is integrated throughout the whole ecosystem.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere. So that was really interesting to me. But then too, I kind of want to shout out the work of Arthur Haynes, because he's doing some work that directly pertains to this, and kind of universally between fungi, plants, animal foods. What's being found is that the nutritional content in gram for gram between wild food and grown food, the wild food is always top ranking. A good example of this is they found that rose hips or violet leaves are about 5 times more nutrient dense in vitamin C than an orange, or sometimes oranges don't even have any vitamin C because the soil is depleted. So kind of what I've just learned is that eat as many wild foods as you can. It's beyond organic. It's the most nutrient dense. And I think there's a lot we can learn from it.
Well, yeah, ultimately nature is going to be a better steward of, any kind of food producing plant. I mean, our attempts to try to reinvigorate soil and do crop rotation are all going to pale in comparison to how nature knows how to refresh itself, renew itself with combinations of plant, fungi, bacteria, the waves they come in. I think your story about the chaga is indicative of that kind of once one of the birch trees is ready, chaga shows up, decomposes it. I mean, nature is such a better keeper of itself than we are at this point. I think we're learning and we're able to help, but I think that's a powerful lesson, and that's really interesting to learn that wild foods, pound for pound, are pretty much more nutrient dense. I mean, they're more nutritious than things that are cultivated, which again, intuitively, that makes sense to me. Things in nature would probably have more nutrition, but it's interesting to hear it quantified. And you said Arthur Haynes. How do you spell his last name so I can make sure I have this written down?
Haines. Yeah, I think he's basically like the top authority on this whole conversation. And, though I think there's so many people in my life that I haven't met personally, but have learned, so many amazing things that have helped me in my life through the information that they put out. So he's definitely number one on my list.
Absolutely. I always say I have hundreds of teachers. I just haven't met them all yet.
Right.
So for these wild forage mushrooms, I would assume you guys have a network now of kind of trusted foragers for the different mushrooms that you use. Are you and your team personally foraging some of the product that actually goes into the extracts?
Yeah, I'd say I probably forage just myself 75% of all the mushrooms that.
Wow,
that we use.
You're like a forage factory.
Yeah. It's just what I love to do. So have kind of all these different spots throughout the country that I kind of revisit depending on the time of year, what's in season, and have just kind of have these relationships with these areas where it's kind of almost like my own personal farm that I just kind of go through, and doesn't get a lot of attention from other foragers. And then to fill the gaps, yeah, there I have like a small network of other foragers that I know that practice the same method of sustainability. We've had conversations about it, and that yeah, I can source and purchase from if I can't get out to these areas and do it myself. Also trying to teach my family members these tactics. I'm trying to get my mom out there. I got my first text from her a week ago being like, "Oh, just found these. What are they?" I was like, "Oh, it's turkey
Nice.
tail."
Oh, you're inoculating the family and creating your own foraging task force as well.
Yeah.
I think sharing the gift of foraging with other people is one of my greatest joys. I think it is like such a satisfying experience to take people out in the woods and show them something that's right there, always available for them, imbuing them with those skills, and then they'll take off. Your mom will start finding all kinds of stuff and get into it and find her own uh, angles of research and find the mushrooms that she's into. And it's so cool to watch people develop like that once you set them on the path. And I guess for me, foraging ends up being like a hugely kind of spiritually relevant experience. Just spending that time in nature to kind of get away from 5G, latent stress, whatever else is going on in urban areas. And I would guess you'd feel that down there in LA, probably even more so than me. For you, does just getting out in nature and foraging, doing what you love, does that kind of have a kind of spiritual experience for you as well, or spiritual significance?
Absolutely. It's like the foundation of my life, really. The more connected I get to nature, I feel the more connected I get to myself. And that just kind of, feeds its way into my whole life. And, alongside this, I really have focused primarily on Native American culture because I think they have an amazing story that is, that's kind of buried deep underground, so to speak, and that you can travel to and kind of uncover it and see, how they lived. And I think we have this cultural bias that we're living in the best time just because we're in the best time and we have technology. But if you look at their lives, there's all these biases that we have now that weren't true. So, they didn't live to just 35. They weren't savages. They had this amazing culture of community and ancestors, art, music, good food. And I heard someone say that if you look at our 40-hour work week, the equivalent of a hunter-gatherers or a Native Americans work week was about 14 hours. They spent 14 hours hunting or foraging, whatever, and then the rest of their time was just spent in leisure and connecting. And I'm just fascinated by that. And I'm always kind of like a truth seeker, so I've just kind of really focused on that. And when I go out into the forest, I try to incorporate what I've learned from them to what I do, and just time and time again, really feel that connection. So, and kind of to keep going on this little vamp here. I had this like really great experience that I think would be great to share, and it happened several years ago when I was kind of just finding my ground as a forager. And personally in my life, my stepfather was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and my family really wanted to take the natural route to kind of help him through it. So I told my mom about the anti-cancer properties of turkey tail and chaga.
Sure.
So we got him on that, and he was eating a really great diet, and he was doing really well. And I had this experience where I was foraging in this forest close to where I grew up with. Wasn't too familiar with it yet. Wasn't too knowledgeable about ecology. But I went in there looking for turkey tails because I wanted to get turkey tails for my stepdad. And it was in the middle of January, pouring rain. It's like 40 degrees out, freezing, not having a good day, not finding anything. I go to this one spot, nothing there. I'm kind of frustrated. And, something I learned from Native American culture was that everything had a spirit. There's the spirit of the trees, there's the spirit of the forest. So kind of, I'm standing on this little mound, really frustrated, and I just think about chaga for some reason. I'm just thinking, all right, I can't find any turkey tail. Like, it would be so great to find some chaga right now. And I just kind of held out my arms and, kind of spoke to the universe or this, the spirit of the chaga. And I said, spirit of the chaga, like, take me to you. And I kid you not, before I even finished that sentence, my head just jerked to the right, like, so, like someone moved me, and
Whoa.
I fixated on this like stump in the distance. And I just kind of said in my head, no, like, come on. So I ran over to the stump, and what it was is this birch tree that fell over. And on the bottom of the stump was just this amazing piece of chaga. And I like bent down in disbelief. And normally you have to like hack chaga off with an axe. It's pretty dense. But from all the rain, it was waterlogged, and it just like, I just snapped it right off the tree
Wow.
with ease, and
Wow.
just like held it in my hands, and was like so blown away by this experience. And this is just one time, but like I can go on for hours about experiences like that, and other foraging friends that I have. You know, we share these stories. We say we dream about them. They come to us in our dreams. But something like this kind of reinforces, what you learn, and and the connection that you feel to nature. So I think having this connection is also a big driving force for what I do with Wild Kingdom and how I treat the ecosystem.
No, that's so important. And I think our relationship with the invisible forces of the planet is a huge thing that is neglected in our culture. And I think referencing a culture like the Native American culture, it's such a different set of priorities. It's such a different perspective on what is success, what is a successful culture. Are we really living in the best time just because we have the most stuff and the most convenience? That's a huge thing that I think drives our culture, is that we always have to have the most convenient everything. But it's like, are we really in balance? Are we really connected with the invisible forces of the world that we all know are there? Whether it's the spirit of the chaga, or as I always say, like the spirit of the forest, we all can sense that, especially when you get out into it more and you're out in nature more. You can sense there are latent energies of these places, of these things, of these life forms, and it's kind of undeniable. And our kind of blind spot as a culture to really exploring those and being in touch with those is something that I think is indicative of a culture that really hasn't figured it out, that really isn't the best or the most successful. And I'm finding a whole new, I'm a symptom of it, but a whole new generation of folks that are really getting into wild foods, that are really getting into foraging, being out in nature. And we're kind of finding that connection. And I think it's making us put new eyes and fresh perspective on the current society. And yeah, we probably do have to pull a lot from Native American society. We probably have to pull a lot of values from other cultures that weren't so convenience and commercially focused to really enhance our own culture. I mean, technology is great, and we have it now. So can we now transition it to use in a way that's, humanistic and ecologically minded, in a way that's not almost kind of like brainless and machine-like, where we do now, where we found this piece of technology. Now we need to make 10 million units every year, even if people don't buy them, keep pumping it. It's like, hold on. Let's have a kind of a reevaluation of where the priorities are, what we're interested in exploring. So I think that's a really interesting story. And I think you're kind of developing a relationship with things that our culture doesn't really have a connection with. And I think that's super important. And I just think it's interesting. I had a feeling you kind of had more of this mindset. I was kind of like, Neil seems like he's kind of on the spiritual tip. He kind of understands nature, but it's interesting. You're melding that in a commercial space where you're saying, hey, I'm still making a product. I'm still putting myself out there into the marketplace. And it's not like you have to adopt the kind of always hustle, always work and be in the commercial system to still make a product that can sustain you and that can give a lot to people. So I think what I'm trying to say is we're like deriving this new model. A lot of like wild food people and natural food people, a lot of foragers are deriving a new model of existing that integrates the current technology without some of like the commercial, baggage that comes with it, and really reorienting our own priorities. And I think you're describing that beautifully in story. And now everyone knows when they go out in the woods, you're really looking for a mushroom, set the intention, call out to the spirit of the mushroom. That might be the quickest way to tap into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right.
So we're approaching just about an hour now. So I guess what is next for Wild Kingdom? I mean, do you guys have more extracts planned? Do you plan to get into anything else? Have you even looked that far ahead? How new are you guys, by the way? When did the company start?
Um, we officially launched May 16th of 2019, so
Wow. Okay.
not even a
Awesome.
year old. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm catching you guys at the start. Well, that'll be
Yeah.
great to do a podcast down the road and like see how things are growing. But I guess initially, what are your thoughts on kind of the future at Wild Kingdom? What do you want to do next?
Yeah. So obviously, I'm super passionate about mushrooms, but for Wild Kingdom, I definitely want to go beyond mushrooms because all these things that we talked about regarding mushrooms, we can easily talk about with plants.
Right.
Um, so I'm really excited about a couple of different plant extracts and teas that I'm working on. So I really hope to, in the next couple of months, kind of get those off the ground because that's another fun way to enjoy all these, benefits from the wild forests. Um, yeah, I'm constantly trying to find new products to kind of introduce to people that are excited about the stuff. And then also too, it's really my mission to find ways to give back to ecology. One way right now that we're doing is we generate a portion of every sale as a donation to this organization called One Tree Planted. And what they do is they plant trees worldwide. And right now they're really going to be focusing on replanting trees in Australia after the devastation from all those fires down. But I think it's just kind of ironic that, or like meant to be that we're donating to planting trees because mushrooms essentially eat trees,
Right.
living and
Right.
dead. So I think that's a way to like kind of complete the circle of life. But, really want to start as the company grows, like finding more organizations to give money to, or maybe start an organization that really focuses on the education of ecology, getting people involved in their local communities and their local forests, and kind of spread this message that we can be a positive impact on ecology, and we can get the health benefits from doing that.
I think that's awesome that not only you're passionate about it, but you have the mindfulness aspect and like a lot of I mean, the only companies that I'll bring on the podcast or I'll want to sample their products are people that have that same kind of ethos, that same kind of philosophy, where it's not just about making the money. There is a way to turn this company almost into a device that not only gives people medicine, harvesting what you love and what you know, but also is then able to give back in a bigger way. So I think that's really exciting. You guys are new, so it'll be fun to watch these projects come together. And I also think I'm jealous of plant foragers. I think plant foraging and the wild plants that are available to us, when I go out with someone who knows wild plants, it just blows my mind. I mean, I don't want to say more so than mushroom, but it like blows my mind just how many of these plants that we're thinking are weeds or like are just growing everywhere. They're like, oh no, that's actually a medicinal you can use for XYZ. So I think that's,
Agreed.
yeah, I think that's really cool. Next, are you knowledgeable about plant foraging? Or are you still learning about it?
Oh, I'm still learning for sure.
Yeah.
I think I have about like 10 species of plants that I can that under my belt that I can incorporate into my strategy. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, the world of plants is like is so much more involved. Like because you can easily just see a wall of green, a
Right.
scenery of green, but you know the skills it takes to identify plants, I think, is way greater than something like mushrooms. It's a little more obvious.
Well, and it's also smart because then you have a longer forage season. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not just the mushrooms, you have the plants year round.
yeah, for sure.
Well, where can people find Wild Kingdom website, social media? Where can people find out more about the company and order products?
Yeah. So number one space is our website, and it's www.wildkingdomextracts.com. Our Instagram handle is at Wild Kingdom Extracts. Our Facebook group is at Wild Kingdom Extracts. So as long as you type in Wild Kingdom Extracts, I'm sure should find us.
The Wild Kingdom, you'd be on the right path.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I do encourage people to go out and find you and support you, especially as you are a nascent business, especially as we've heard, you're doing things in kind of this incredibly sustainable and incredibly mindful way that you're creating great products. You're doing it with all the best source mushrooms. And also you're someone who knows about these things. I mean, you breaking down the dual extraction, the compounds, it's obvious that you have an intimate working knowledge of how these things operate. So when you're making a product, I have more faith that it will be more bioavailable, more optimized for my body and my usage. So I do encourage people to go support you. And as a final couple thoughts here, I'm starting to integrate some little questions at the end just to learn more about the true Neil. What is your favorite mushroom if you can pick one?
Oh boy. I always tell people when they ask me that's like, who's your favorite child?
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Right. This has been a tough one for a lot of people. They're like, what do you mean? Like favorite one to find, favorite one visually, favorite one to eat, favorite one. So if there was one that could somehow stand apart as the favorite.
well, I will say I don't think I could live without chaga and turkey tail.
Okay.
Um, just the duo of those two alone, like I think are amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I could just pick one, so I'll pick two. I'll say chaga and turkey.
Chaga and turkey tail. I had a feeling turkey tail was going to get in there. It's the logo of the company. It was like the mushroom you started with. I had a feeling turkey tail would be high on the list. And then we've talked about it a lot already, but what is the lasting impact you hope to make on the planet?
Wow.
You only have one sentence. No, that's a big question.
Yeah, I think we're just at a crossroads here. I think we all know that the modern world is kind of consuming the health of its habitat. So what I'm just trying to do in my short time here is to, be a catalyst for change. I'm trying to be a spokesperson for ecology, trying to restore that wild aspect in every human that we have in our lineage. Trying to just raise more awareness for nature and kind of proving that we can be a positive force. And I hope down the road that that I've been able to set up institutions to support that that go on, after my time here is up.
What an optimistic, hopeful message. It's not too late. We as humans can have a beneficial effect on the planet. Let's get it together and do this thing. Well,
So,
Neil, it has been awesome to meet you and have you on the show. And yeah, I'm excited for the next time either you're up north and I'm down south and we can go foraging.
absolutely, I was going to say that. Yeah, I'm hoping to be up north your way very soon. So I'll definitely let you know.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, man. Well, until next time, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.